Good evening. We want to welcome our viewers of the Johnson City Government Information Channel and Charter Cable Channel 192 and Comcast Cable Channel 17 to this live telecast of the July 11th, 2017 Johnson City Regional Planning Commission meeting. This meeting will be rebroadcast on Friday, July 14th at 12 o'clock noon. Thank you all for coming. At this point, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm going to have Commissioner Rowley go ahead and give us our invocation and then pledge.
Let us pray. Our Father, be with us in these moments as we gather to do the business of the day. May we remember to listen well, to speak clearly. May we be present to one another here at this time. Let us always remember to help those that need guidance and help keep the fabric of our city's planning quest orderly and strong. Please face the flag and pledge our allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now for our next item on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. I have a motion to approve. Or
Move approval.
Move and second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next will be approval of the minutes from our last meeting dated June 13th, 2017.
So moved.
Move for approval?
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have no unfinished business to discuss at this time, and we will move on to new business. The first order of new business, Mr. Young will go ahead and present, will be an annexation of a property located on Knob Creek Road.
Yes, sir. Annexation requested for 3244 Knob Creek Road, approximately 3.3 acres, owned by Tyler Mackey. Currently, there's one property on, or one dwelling on the property with a population of 4. The request for annexation is to utilize Johnson City school system. The biggest thing to note with this annexation is that the city commits no sewer services to be extended to the property at this time. We do not, and we will not commit to any kind of sewer extension in the future.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry I'm late.
Staff recommends approval.
Lest that be overlooked in the
Did you really want to do this?
I'm sucking it in. It's as close as I can do. There we go.
I guess we have to recognize the chair.
Recognize the chair.
Sorry, folks.
Okay, Matt. Apologize for the...
Oh,
You were
no.
saying
all
staff
this-
did recommend approval.
Staff does recommend approval. The property owner is aware that the city makes no commitment to provide sanitary sewer to the location. They are aware of that. There's a letter in your packet making you aware of that, but staff does recommend approval of the annexation of 3244 Knob Creek Road.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for staff at this moment regarding the annexation?
Matt, what guards the city against a future property owner claiming an entitlement to city sewer service?
Our water sewer department will look at what was agreed upon in the plan of services. The fact that we have that note there kind of defends us about that. And like I said, we also have the letter from them acknowledging they understand that they are to be brought in to the city. There is no commitment to
So
provide
the plan of
sewer.
service is binding on subsequent
Yes.
property owners?
Yes, so it will travel with the property, not the owner.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody here wishing to speak for or against this annexation? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public hearing, and we'll open up for discussion on the commission or motions.
Move approval.
We have a motion for approval from Commissioner Weiss
Second.
and a second, Ms. Clark. If you'll please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Commissioner Sandos?
Yes.
And Chairman Zions.
Yes. Thank you. We'll move on to our next order of business tonight, which will be to consider the abandonment of the current road at the Ed Baxter, and at least the right-of-way. And Asong will go ahead and present for us. Thank you, sir.
The right-of-way under consideration for abandonment is the current Ed Baxter Road. The northern part of this road is owned by the city, the right-of-way is owned by the city, and the southern part, shaped as a trapezium, is owned. TDOT, that is Tennessee Department of Transportation, owns the fee simple on the southern part. If the city were to abandon the northern part of the road, TDOT will have to take action to abandon its own part of the right-of-way. When staff received this particular request and did a couple of studies in this particular area, the request was simply just to abandon Ed Baxter Road. There was no relocation proposed. Staff did a traffic count on the road and found that it was significantly high. The high traffic hours had about 64 vehicles per hour, which was significant for that particular residential. A lot of the cars were going to this residential neighborhood. There is also a Johnson City transit stop on that particular road. It also serves as a school bus route. Staff recommended initially to the developer that the road be relocated westward, in which case it would have aligned with Tucker Lane. However, the area west of Tucker Lane on the property is more flat, more available, or can more properly used for construction of a building than the far eastern section. This would have been what it would have looked like if it was constructed to face Tucker Lane. The developer is proposing that the city abandon the current Ed Baxter Road and relocate. The developer will construct the new road, aligning it with Meriday Drive. This is the concept plan for the project. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve and recommend to the City Commission to abandon this right-of-way, subject to the city accepting the new road. So the developer will construct the new road, submit it to the Planning Commission for approval. The Planning Commission will approve the new road before the closure of the current right-of-way becomes effective. In that way, adjoining residents in the adjoining neighborhood can continue to have access. The access to US 11E will not be interrupted at any point.
And to be clear, any new road has to meet complete city approval in that process, preliminary plat, final plat approval, TDOT study on it. Correct. So then when we accept it, it's an acceptable road into the city at that point. So it's gone through all those checks to make sure it's adequate and will serve the public the way it should.
Yes, sir.
That's how so it wouldn't be accepted before that point.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Asan, why was that west? Why was the original route not at Tucker Lane not? Why did staff agree that wasn't the best approach?
Initially, we considered putting it on Tucker Lane. The area west of the current Ed Baxter Road, which will precisely be here, is more suitable for a building. It's more flat. So if the developer were to do a project in future to construct, it would be more appropriate to construct in this area. So he's just kind of maximizing land, how much land he can use in future to put a building. This area, it's kind of more slopey. However, before the final plat, before the road is constructed, we will require a preliminary plat. That preliminary plat will provide information on the topography of the site. So all of that will be reviewed to make sure that the new road meets the city requirements, how steep it has to be.
can you comment on the interplay between the city's abandonment of its interest and TDOT's abandonment of its interest? How do those two things work together?
Before TDOT abandons its right-of-way, TDOT requires that the city must first abandon the right-of-way. So the city will have to provide a recommendation, submit a recommendation to TDOT saying we are okay with you proceeding with the abandonment of your right-of-way.
And then it's up, excuse me, it's up to the developer to make a deal with TDOT,
With
work
TDOT.
that out with them?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And our right-of-way is just a right-of-way. It's not, we don't own the ground. It's just an easement.
It's just, yes, we basically just own the right-of-way. We don't own the fee simple. TDOT, however, stated to me that they own the fee simple on their own section. So the developer will actually have to go to TDOT and buy the land.
Or just accept that grassy knoll.
All right.
If you can back up a few slides to the area that had the area for the proposed abandonment will actually go all the way down to the Bristol Highway, correct? It'll encroach through the area of the proposed TDOT right-of-way, meaning our proposed abandonment will extend from East Mountain View Road
Right
all
now-
the way to Bristol Highway.
Yes.
It doesn't
All-
cut off at the blue area.
No, all interest, any and all interest we have on Ed Baxter Road, we will be abandoning it.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Thank you. Thank you very much, Hassan. At this point, we'd like to go ahead and open up public comment for or against this project. I think it might make sense to go ahead and have the folks have a chance to speak for it if they'd like to step forward so they can clear up any concerns, and then we'll move on to the folks who'd like to speak against.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Sprague.
Are you speaking for or against the?
Against.
If I can have you wait just a moment, I'm going to have the developers and the people who are interested in speaking for come up first, and we'll just keep it organized that way.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Wayne.
Mr. Chairman, Commission, my name is Scott Calhoun, and I just wanted to...
Can you give us your address as well, too, please?
Yes, my address is 40 Jonestown Road, Asheville, North Carolina.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that we have a few representatives of the property owner here, and that we're available to answer any questions you or anyone may have.
Thank you very much. Okay. If you'd like to go ahead and stand up now, sir, I think you're ready. Just give us your name and address. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. My name is Wayne Sprague. I live at 1104 Windsor Lane. Excuse me, 1105 Windsor Lane in Johnson City. And I am against this road. The reason being is because of the amount of traffic that goes down this road. It is, as the gentleman said, quite a number of cars go in and out of there to go to the developments that are behind that area. If they move it to where they were talking about originally on the west side, which is closer to where Ride Revolution was, that's where a TVA power lines go through there. They also go through on the Tucker Lane, and basically, if they move the road down on that area, that'll put more traffic on Tucker Lane, more traffic on, or less traffic on Mountain View. It'll also, as I said, there was a school bus stop there on the corner. There's also a bus stop there on the end of the corner, closest to Mountain View. So I recommend that basically that the commission does not approve this road change, leaves the road as it is, and I know why they're presenting this plan to you. They want to move the Ford dealership down there. They've already posted their signs out there in front of the property, and personal observation, we already have enough dealerships out there. When they use their bullhorns or their loudspeakers, it can be heard in our subdivision. If they build the Ford dealership on that side of the road, it'll become a noise hazard.
Thank you. I appreciate you all being here, but one of the things I do ask when we have public comment is that we don't clap, speak, or jeer. It just decreases the public decorum for what we're trying to do here. The next person I'd like to have come up, please, speaking for or speaking against.
My name is Sally Henderson. I live at 219 Maridale Drive. I'm not really, you didn't say not against, and I guess I'm kind of in between.
Fantastic.
I'm not actually against, but...
Just want to speak about it. I think that's
yes.
fantastic.
And I
Great.
guess I'll back up and just say thank you to Matt Young for giving us a notice that this was happening, and just the opportunity to express some concerns. Living there for 20 years, and I'll go back maybe 15 years, there was a child that was almost killed, T-bone going into Chaparral dealership. At that point, I started with Todd, who's in the traffic division, and said, please, can we get a light on Bristol Highway before there's a fatality? Well, I would bug Todd. What is Todd's last name with traffic?
It's
Anthony Todd. I'd bother him, call him every couple of months. To make a long story short, there's finally a light at the fire station and there's a light at Food Lion. Still not a light where the majority of traffic exists. So I think the abandonment doesn't really concern me as much. I mean, whether it's here or whether it's there, to me is not as big a factor as the traffic impact on Bristol Highway. I encourage all of you to drive from Johnson City, turn into Ed Baxter Lane, first thing in the morning, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, weekends, Bristol, when the Bristol race is on, and tell me if you are not praying that people are looking straight ahead. Because the typical reaction, as of course, because the cars are so nice, driving down Bristol Highway, they're looking at the cars. They're not looking at me in the middle lane trying to turn. When I stopped by just a couple of dealerships and businesses along Bristol Highway this morning before going to work, and their number one comment to me was, we see accidents every morning. We watch accidents every morning. So what I would ask that you all consider is, please ask for an accident, demand an accident report on what is along Bristol Highway, especially in that stretch from, I mean, it's a major commercial area. You have 4, 5, 6 automobile dealerships. It's already there. I don't mind Johnson City Ford or whoever. The issue is, though, now it's across the street. So now people are going to be looking this way, head-on, as well as looking the other way. I encourage you just to understand what we face as residents every day on a major commercial highway that does not have a traffic light. So I'm thinking when all this construction is going and relocation, please address a traffic light. It could be at Zeke's, it could be at the new, whether it's called Ed Baxter Lane or Maridale or whatever you're going to call it, at the intersection of Mountain View and at the current Ed Baxter Lane, or actually on Maridale, is a family with small children. So you have got, traffic count, I mean, I assume that that's going to be a major part of this consideration, is how much additional traffic is going to be on Bristol Highway, as well as what's the impact on Mountain View, because on Tucker Lane, if I work in Jonesboro, so I try not to go on Bristol Highway because of, if I pray in the morning, I try not to pray on my way home also, but coming on, I think the impact on Mountain View will be incredible, because that should be the natural way for people, if you're coming up Roan, take a ride on Mountain View and hit Johnson City Ford that way.
Okay.
So Mountain View is a very narrow road. So I had look at the impact that it's going to have on Mountain View.
Very much.
And to summarize, this, as a speed deterrent, I'd also ask for what the average speed, how many tickets are issued on there. Bristol race impact. One last thing, I guess, every time when I did mention businesses, of course, everybody wanted the traffic light, everybody was for it, but everybody wanted the traffic light closest to their business. And I think that's just an overall, people have to remember that a light is good, what's good for one is good for all. Just to stop traffic would be, I think, beneficial, no matter where it's located.
Thank you for your comments.
So, you're welcome.
Appreciate you.
Hi, I'm Timber Aldridge, and I live at 300 Marydale Drive in Johnson City. And like Sally, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not for it necessarily either. I have some concerns. The biggest concern is I live on Marydale Drive, and I never got a notification that this was even happening. I appreciate the fact that I did hear about it, and I got some information. I am in charge of a network neighborhood. So I sent out a message to all the neighbors last night, asking them, or basically telling them about this, asking them if they got the notification, and asking them to come tonight. And if they couldn't come tonight, I'll be more than happy to express their feelings. Mostly everybody but 2 people did not get a notification either. And so I am concerned about that, especially considering that I do live on Marydale, and this is affecting the Marydale Drive.
I mean, I try not to generally engage in conversation about this, but just to let you know, the general idea, I think the city's plans when we do have right-of-way abandonments, it's the people immediately right next to it that are affected. And in this case, our discussions with staff was they actually did expand that beyond that. But as far as everybody who lives up an entire road away from a right-of-way abandonment has not been part of what the city does routinely for any right-of-way consideration. So they actually did expand it for this concern beyond what the normal norms are, just so you know. I'm sure everybody hates the fact that you didn't get informed the way you'd like to, and I'm glad that you let everybody else know. So that's, you're doing your work, and that's great. But I didn't want you to think that our staff, who's really doing a great job, didn't actually expand.
Right,
They certainly
and that's
did.
what I kind of figured is that the older subdivision there on Marydale probably got the notifications, and the newer subdivision in Hunterwood did not. I'm just expressing, again, what the neighbors wanted me to express.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I'm concerned about is, like Sally said, the traffic getting out on the Bristol Highway is extremely tough. I don't know what happened to etiquette, but people don't get over anymore into the fast lane and let you out. And so therefore you can sit there for a long time. I'm concerned because there's a huge difference in getting out on Green Valley versus Ed Baxter, and then a huge difference on Timberlake. And on Timberlake, you can pretty much forget trying to get out because everybody's getting over in that right lane to get up on the interstate. And so, or on State of Franklin, I should say. So I am concerned about that, and that we're moving it closer to Green Valley, and the fact that I think that traffic is going to be even harder now to get out because, that traffic comes up over that hill, and they do tend to go a little fast. They do not get over, and so I'm very concerned about that. The other thing is, will this road have sidewalks on it by any chance? I know most new roads in Johnson City require a sidewalk. Will that be built on this road? Again, my concern is we have a lot of people, because we have so many people in that neighborhood that walk the streets, and it is so dangerous right now, people walking and riding and that sort of thing. So again, for pedestrian safety, I would highly recommend the sidewalks.
Right. Thank you for asking. I'll put your comment down. Next.
My name is Erica McMurray. I live at 1210 Broadleaf Drive. I'm on the corner of Broadleaf and Mountain View. I am, like Timber, I'm neither necessarily for or against. I do have several concerns, and the proposal to move this road just brings up some other issues that are occurring on Mountain View, and as they express, the ability to get in and out of our area onto the Bristol Highway, and truthfully, even onto Rhone Street. We have 3 points of access along this portion of East Mountain View in that immediate vicinity. There is Timberlake, there's Ed Baxter, and there is Green Valley. At Green Valley, there is a significant difficulty getting in and out of that area because of visibility, and there's not really a turn lane there if you're trying to turn left because there's no red light, the ability to get out when traffic is heavy. The red light at Wingdare Park in my opinion, has kind of compounded that, because what happens is the traffic is more compressed, so there's less space in between the vehicles to be able to pull out when traffic is heavy. At the other end, on Timberlake, it's the same thing. All of the cars are merging into the left-hand lane, and you can't even hardly turn right there because they're all trying to merge onto that Bristol bypass. And so the moving of Ed Baxter, that is one of the easiest places to get out onto the Bristol Highway, and even that is difficult. So I think as they're considering moving this, a red light really is a major priority. And you can look at this picture here on there, and you can see the sheer number of houses, and that's not including the apartment complexes and the developments that are further down Timberlake that are also trying to exit out into that vicinity. So there's they said there's 64 cars an hour going down Ed Baxter, which then gives you an idea of how many cars are then traveling down Mountain View. And as they pointed out, there is a bus stop at Ed Baxter. There is also a bus stop at the four-way stop between Mountain View and Timberlake. And so people are having to walk that road to get to and from the bus stop. They walk it to walk their dogs, they walk it to get down to the store, etc. I've got a couple of pictures just of the visibility, and somebody even walking with strollers. It's not the first time I've seen. But the consideration of the amount of volume that is going down Mountain View and at the rates of speed that they're going down. I had a Johnson City police officer stop, and he lives off of Timberlake, and he asked me about concerns about drag racing, because people literally race down Mountain View. They also race down Bristol Highway. And so I know that safety is, part of your all's concern as well. And so if we're looking at doing something with the roads there, this is something that we really need to take a look at. You've got people that are walking to the bus stops. They are using that road in that manner. So we either need sidewalks or speed bumps or something to slow some traffic down on that road.
Okay.
I think the posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour, and cars regularly do much greater than that.
I think one of the things I like to do to talk about how we guide our conversation going forward and input, we're hearing some of the same things over again, and we might be a little more efficient if we say, I second the idea that we need traffic control or speed control, or we might be here for a while. Secondly, we're talking about removing and replacing a road in this current proposal, so we're not increasing roads or traffic or things like that, but the things that I'm hearing talking about are really how do we control traffic flow for something that's already there. This seems to have sparked an opportunity for everyone to speak about concerns that they have about really things that are happening already on Ed Baxter or Green Valley or somewhere next to that. And those are reasonable concerns, but they may not necessarily have a lot to do with specifically this road removal and movement down the road. I just kind of wanted to compress this discussion a little bit so we stay on topic that way. However, these are great concerns, and I want to bring them up with our traffic folks who can answer this and maybe explain the process lately as to, hey, how do we decide when do we put a traffic light in? Who decides that first off? Because it's not necessarily just up to Johnson City, but other folks. So I thought it might just be a good time for me to stop and help direct that conversation, let you know we've got our ear, and I can have Mr. Cantrell step up later and chat a little bit more about that. So thank you. I mean, that's what I hear. But these are good traffic concerns that if we were or were not moving Ed Baxter today at all, or even considering that, we'd just be saying, wow, we're having a hard time getting on to the Bristol Highway. And so if these are our concerns, please don't feel like you can't speak, but let's compress it and hold our talks to about 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. I apologize. My concern is just if we're going to put a new road in, that's the time you want to do some of those. If you're going to put a red line in and you're already putting a new road in and it's going to be another access. I had one last point, which is if they're moving Ed Baxter further to the east, it's 930 feet from Green Valley. It seems a little redundant at that point then to put in another road if you can drive another 930 feet and have an exit. Again, the challenge being the ability to get on and off, and you're going to significantly increase your traffic pattern then on Green Valley as well. So I think there's maybe some more study that needs.
I think that's a reasonable thing to bring up, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that process occurs. Just because there's a proposal to move the road doesn't mean that it meets sight and distance and limited all these types of traffic study requirements. They're incumbent upon approval of a preliminary plat or a final plat.
Right.
All those things have to go through TDOT to actually meet what's reasonable. And my understanding, that's how they look at traffic flow and safety. And of course, anything that we approve has to meet current, Angie can second this, sidewalk regulations that we have for subdivided properties. So all those things are in there. So that's improved, or that's there. I just thought it would be nice to take a minute and stop and allay some of those concerns or fears about how that process moves forward, if it were to move forward, not that, and that's what we're here to discuss. So
Yes, sir.
thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you.
Is there presently a traffic light at Green Valley?
No. And, okay, who would like to speak next?
My name is Bill Henderson. I'm resident 219 Marydale Drive. Live with the one that talks so long. One of the questions I have, Sally spoke eloquently on what our stance is. With the proposed new road are being moved, what's the intersection at Mountain View and Ed Baxter Road going to be? Is that going to be a four-way stop sign? Is that going to be the way it exists now, which is Mountain View has the right-of-way? Because again, like she just said, it's only 900 feet, and that can be a suicide corner right there. And also, I'd just like to add, in 20 years of living in our subdivision, which is great, I love the car dealers, I love to look at new cars and everything, so I have no problem with the Ford dealership coming in there and developing, and as much as we can develop to make the city great, that's perfect. But the traffic is an absolute nightmare. And also, if you have seen the development of the Bristol Highway, which I assume everybody in here has, I mean, there has been a lot of businesses have failed on the Bristol Highway that could have made it. And it's strictly because people cannot turn into the businesses. I mean, customers will not fight that traffic to try to turn left. So I know we're talking about traffic issues, but at the same time, if we're going to do something, let's get it all done at the same time and get it done right. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next.
Hi, I'm Charles Parker. I live at 130 Tucker Lane. I've lived there since 1995. Woo, time flies when you're having fun. If you just go out there and look at that area, one of the problems I have about closing Ed Baxter, you've got three access roads from the if you leave the Kingsport Highway, you only have three roads to access all those neighborhoods. One of them's Timberlake, which is a very poor access. And if you're coming off State of Franklin, you cannot even use Timberlake as an access, which people do. They'll come to the end of that ramp and try to do a U-turn back, and that's a nightmare too. But that leaves you with two entrances into those neighborhoods if you come off of the State of Franklin. And if you go out there and look, you might have to go out there and look to see what's going on. And you're taking what I call the southern, what y'all call the westernmost exit into our neighborhood and moving it further east. So you're just moving everybody all the way up here and having to come back. Anybody that lives in this area that comes off State of Franklin has to go all the way up there and come back as it is. Now, you might not realize that. If you're coming up Rowan Street, you can get off on Timberlake. But as they pointed out before, everybody's pulling over on the Bristol Highway to get on to State of Franklin, which jams that up, and you cannot get out of there. None of those three roads have a left turn dedicated. Sit there, I'm going to take left turn, let's let the other people going right get out of here. And that would help a lot on all three of those roads. But I would love to just either have it, and I know people don't want to move down there to Tucker Lane, but that would be a better, more southern entrance for people coming off of State of Franklin, as opposed to going all the way up. You're making us all go up there to come back now, if you're coming from Johnson City. I'll live with whatever you decide. I would prefer Ed Baxter stay open. I would prefer that the Ford place have some kind of buffer in the backside of these neighborhoods, because the noise is ridiculous from the other dealers leave their music on all weekend or all night long and stuff. So you're out there and got music blaring everywhere. So
Let me, we'll have some discussion on buffers and plats,
Right.
and that takes place in
Right.
This is a business corridor,
Yeah,
obviously.
right, obviously.
But there are some thoughts that way, and we can have staff just mention something to that.
But it's very hard getting in and out.
Okay.
And as it is, you're going to force everybody up there to be side by side trying to get out.
Thank you.
So that's not real smart in my book. But, bless you guys, y'all got the brains, I don't. I live there. You're welcome to come by anytime, and we'll let you walk around the neighborhood, get off State of Franklin and see people trying to get into Timberlake, and you'll see what's up there.
But you
Thank
should
you.
not overestimate this group.
At your house.
Well, wait a minute, come on, Joe. You gotta have something to be sitting up there, right? Oh, wait a minute, y'all got.
What time's dinner?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Limry, 1101 East Mountain View Road. I don't like public speaking, but I'm up here.
Glad to have you.
Unlike my neighbor, I would be highly opposed to anything on Tucker. I own the extra lot, which is Tucker. I have a young kid. I know there's other new drivers. I have an elderly father-in-law, living with me. So any noise, concerns, I guess I'm kind of for Ed Baxter to stay open. I couldn't imagine going off of Maridale or coming off of Bristol Highway and making a left and trying to get up to Maridale. I think there's too much traffic. I call it Russian Roulette Highway as it is, because there is no specific turning lane. You're just dodging people coming in and out of the car dealerships. But anyway, for Ed Baxter, I mean, I like it
I'm sorry, I
open.
didn't understand. I want to make this clear in my head. Moving the road east so many hundreds of feet changes the left-hand turning. How? Help me out with that. I missed that.
Right. If you were to move it down to Maridale.
Okay.
So say I'm on Bristol Highway and I'm going to make a left onto the new entrance up towards Maridale.
Okay.
I just feel like there's still just too much traffic. You have to be out there, like they said, mornings, evenings. I came off of Ed Baxter today to get here to the meeting. I like the road. It's convenient. I just feel like there's too much traffic out there. Why move a road that works right now? So, but definitely opposed, nothing on Tucker.
Well, it doesn't sound like it's working, though. And
Yeah, that's
think
what I hear, is that people
the
aren't
broader
happy with
point
this at
is,
all.
regardless of whether the roads stay the way the roads are, or the roads are changed the way the petitioner's asking, what you all have done is made a very effective case for it's not working.
Yeah.
And so, just to again reiterate what the chairman has said, this body is not tasked with the public safety questions and the traffic questions. What we're tasked with is whether to abandon that right-of-way, and if we abandon that right-of-way, whether to make it contingent on establishing another street to be accepted in as a city street. In the context of that occurring, there may be an opportunity, and so there have been several things said to which I have questions for staff, that may be opportunities to try to fix and refine this, but it's important to know there's a whole lot of other, Mountain View has its own struggles on either end. And there are already things being done to address the Mountain View intersection down on the Kingsport Highway side. I've traveled out there regularly. We have friends that live out on Timber Ridge. I know what you're talking about. Let's not lose sight of the fact that this is a very narrowly defined petition. And it is not about everything and anything that's wrong on that end of Mountain View. It's about one particular road and abandoning the right-of-way. And that's not for or against what you're saying. It's just let's kind of narrow it back to what we get to decide.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for your discussion. Please don't want you to feel badgered by a question from the chair. That was not it at all. Just, we really want to understand. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Bill Coleman. My wife and I live at 1004 Whitling Wood. Most of my concerns have been addressed about the traffic tonight. I do endorse wherever you put the road, we do need a traffic light, very seriously, for traffic control and safety for turning in and turning out that neighborhood. I have a couple other concerns, and I don't know whether this is the format or not, but I'd like to find out if this is the place to talk about a new automobile business on Bristol Highway, which is expected and understandable. That's a commercial property. But we're concerned in our neighborhood with sound and lights. As we approve this project, I'd like to see that our neighborhoods are protected against lights that are beamed upward into our neighborhoods and sound systems that are aimed upwards. I live on the top of the hill, and everything they say at Nissan I can hear in my house. We've talked to Nissan, and they have in fact turned it down. They were the loudest of the dealerships along there. And all we need in our front door is another dealership with 125 dB. So as we plan the project, I'd like to see that the aesthetics and the value of our properties are considered in the light exposure and the sound exposure, and again, access from the dealership onto Mountain View itself. If you move the street is one thing, but the dealers got their in and out exits right in front of our entrance to our neighborhood. You've just moved the problem down a little bit more. So those are the three things I'd like to consider, and a barrier. If in aesthetics, as they plan their layout of their building and their lots, if we could have, if the city would have some influence over them placing some type of shrubs or some barrier between the Mountain View border of their properties and our properties.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Again, we're not talking about the road when we talk about these issues. It's not that they're not legitimate, but they have more to do with what our city ordinances are, what the zoning requirements are, what our buffer requirements are for our new plat. And those are reasonable things, and as a courtesy, we'll try to have staff address that just so we can inform those who took the time to come today. But that won't necessarily directly affect what we're dealing with. What we're talking about there is basically how well are we holding on to what our current zoning laws are and our plans, and are we being good neighbors? So, and that's a little different from what we do
So
on
to
the road.
review for staff, be ready to talk about barriers, light, and sound.
Yep,
All right.
we're good. We got it. I've even actually shaped it. We've got little triangles and squares for the things that are all in the same categories. We're good.
Good evening. My name is John DeBurdette. I'm a resident of Whitling Woods subdivision at 1002. I am really opposed to moving the road down towards Tucker because I feel that it's going to directly affect my neighborhood. It's going to put much more traffic on. Again, I'm going to address the same thing that Captain Coleman said as far as egress and ingress for this dealership. I know we can't, it's that land is zone commercial. I fully understand that. But if you allow them to come and go off of Mountain View, so many times we have cars, people come up and drive their cars through our neighborhood. I live on the top of the hill, so they're trying them out, and I'm on a dead end. And we have small children in the neighborhood. That's always a concern, trying to slow people down. I also would like the city to, the planners to think about our property values. As a citizen of Johnson City, I'm always concerned about that. I would like to be able to sell my property in a few years. I would like for the dealers to come in and be a good neighbor to us. Quality of life is very important. Johnson City advertises that, and I think you need to plan and think about that when you allow this. This is going to be the first dealership on this side of Bristol Highway. I've lived in this neighborhood for 16 years. There's other types of properties on that, but that's going to put a tremendous amount of traffic on there. The sound, the light, and the volume of traffic. Please take time and come up and drive through these areas, or have your planners put Google Maps on here where you're actually down and can see these roads and see how it affects all of us.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak concerning this matter at this point?
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, ma'am.
I promise it'll be a quick one, and this is probably to Johnson City Board. Is your main entrance going to be off of Bristol Highway?
Wait, let's not have a discussion amongst the group. I'm sorry, we can't do that.
The camera people lose their
Oh, I'm
minds when
sorry.
you're not talking
Will
to
the main
microphone.
access for Johnson City Ford be off of Bristol Highway, or will it be off of Mountain View?
Okay, that's a question that we can have posed for the developers.
Okay.
If a developer would like to step forward and give us their answer.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Introduced myself earlier, but failed to mention my responsibility in the project is to manage the design and construction of the proposed new facility. One thing I did want to say is, as the father of two children that grew up on a quiet city street that became a busy city street, I appreciate where all of you are coming from. I've actually been in other meetings in your seat before and completely understand those concerns. Specific to what's going on tonight, actually, Beyond that, we hope that we're back before the Planning Commission and Council in the future talking about the new facility. I know we're not here to discuss that tonight, but did want to mention that, I have taken some notes and duly noted your concerns about lighting and noise, and we want to be responsible developers and realize that you're living, right next door to us. We've got Ed Johnson is going to be the general manager, is the current general manager of Johnson City Ford, will manage a new facility. He's here tonight. Daniel Johnson, a regional vice president of operations, is here, and our civil engineer, Gary Waddell. And I appreciate your time, but wanted these folks to know we are committed to being a responsible developer and understand your concerns.
So has the decision about where the access points will be been made yet?
Yes, the primary access as proposed is directly off of Bristol Highway, not Ed Baxter. There is a connection shown on Ed Baxter. In fact, I believe will be required, but the primary, most of our traffic is for service visitors, and we have a proposed curb cut, as mentioned, directly off of Bristol Highway that lines up directly with the service drive. So that's
What about what about Mountain View Road?
I believe the preliminary plan shows a curb cut on Mountain View at this time.
Is there a curb cut off the new road, which on this map, they're calling it Maridale Drive Extension? Is there a curb cut off of that?
Yes, there is.
And again, just for the benefit of those who are watching these deliberations, these are notes of curiosity, but they're not factors in the decision we'll make about whether to recommend abandoning the right-of-way. Because the truth is, we could abandon the right-of-way, this whole thing could move forward, and then Johnson City Ford could decide they want to be, Greenville Ford, or they want to stay where they're at, and we will have still abandoned a right-of-way, and there'll be a new road, and it could be something totally different. So we're talking about abandoning a right-of-way.
That's
period.
exactly right. And to expand on that, we're not only abandoning a right-of-way, but how do we do it, and if we were to do it or consider it in such a way that it protected the citizens that and that's what we're here to do, is to consider those. These are really good questions, but we're almost putting the cart in front of the horse here a little bit when we start talking about what the plat design is going to be. That's not specifically what we're here for tonight. But thank you very much. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak for or against or about this project? Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for being here and seeing that. We'll go ahead and close public hearing on it and open up for discussion on the commission and questions for staff that we'll have. Yes.
I'd like to get Alan Cantrell, ask him a question, please.
Please. And in fact, can I just ask him a couple of them real quick and then have you step in? Okay, great. Alan, there were some questions on us, basically traffic. Do we see increased or decreased traffic proposed by replacing one road with the other or moving it up? And also, I was hoping maybe you could explain site distances and how we go about the process of approving a new road to make sure that it didn't overburden or put two roads too close together. How safe is it? What's that process, if you don't mind explaining that to us? So, traffic count, site distance, and then if you can speak to a traffic light and what's involved in initiating that process or evaluating that process, and whose authority does that fall under?
Okay. First, since you had the public do this, and since most of them don't know me, I'll tell them who I am. I'm Alan Cantrell. My title is City Engineer. I work in the Public Works Department. The traffic engineer also works in the Public Works Department. But so we don't have 6 or 7 people here. I represent that department. I work under the Public Works Director, who is my boss. The traffic engineer also works under the Public Works Director. But I'm appointed for the department, for this particular body, to speak for that department. You'll probably have to guide me. I remember your last thing was the traffic signal. If you don't mind, I'll start
car
there.
counts up and down, and what do you foresee changing? You notice the number of cars.
Let me start with the signal process, and I'll work my way back probably to your number one. The highway belongs to the state of Tennessee. The city is responsible for any traffic light that is placed on that highway.
If a traffic light is warranted, certain volumes have to be met, accidents have to be counted, traffic volume is counted. After a study, we have to present that to the state and convince them that it's okay to put a traffic light up, because traffic lights in themselves do cause accidents of a different kind. So you may actually not change accidents because you just simply change the way they're happening. It will help people get on and off the highway, but we have to pay particular attention where we do put a traffic light so that we don't put one at a particular location that may be warranted, but it doesn't serve as many people as another one that may be just a few hundred feet down the road. Lights are expensive, so that's why you don't see us doing a lot of them all the time. So first you have to convince the state that we need a light. They will issue a permit to the city. They will not pay us a dime to build it. We have to, take care of it from then on. We were promising through that permit process that we will maintain the light and keep it in a safe condition and not let it become derelict. The road approval process begins with a preliminary plat. You have seen a concept plan tonight for the abandonment, but the subdivision process is what you go through to create a new road. The right-of-way has to be a particular width. The road has to be a particular width. We do require sidewalks. A non-residential road is what would have to be built here, and on that particular road, one sidewalk is 8 feet wide for multi-purpose. You can ride the bike on it as well as walk on it. The other side is 5 feet wide. That's just a short segment of streets, and there probably aren't any other sidewalks back in the neighborhood that would connect to it, but at least that's a start in getting a sidewalk, and that's why we require them. The preliminary plat is reviewed by staff and brought to you. We make sure that what's being proposed meets our minimum standards. A traffic light could be considered at that time. It could be part of the approval process, but you get down to that after you approve the preliminary plat. The construction drawings are approved by staff. You don't see those. When staff reviews the construction drawings and approves them, the contractor or the builder can get a permit, grading permit, and begin to build the street. After he's completed the street, we come back to you for final plat approval. At final plat approval, you're accepting that street. Certain people have to certify, I'm one of them, that the street was built to our standards. We signed that plat saying that it has met our standards. It's presented to you. The Secretary of the Planning Commission has to sign the plat after your approval of it, and then it's recorded. At that time, it's now a public right-of-way. Two of those, I think, were addressed. What was your third one?
Car counts, up and down.
Traffic counts are not necessarily something that are triggered by this type of action tonight. You'll see in rezoning issues where they'll estimate the number of trips that a apartment complex or a shopping center may add to the street. What we see here is a existing street that has a certain volume on it being moved a few hundred feet to the east. You would expect that the same traffic that's on that existing street today would shift with that new street. Unless that new street is so inconvenient that no one would go to it, I would expect that traffic would shift to the new location. As far as safety, it would depend on what's across the street from the current Ed Baxter versus what's across the street from the new location on the highway. For instance, if there's a lot of traffic across from Ed Baxter coming and going from someone's driveway, then you may have the same thing occur at the other location, or you may have more traffic from a driveway opposite it. So depends on what's across the street. Now what we'll do, we usually, whether it be a driveway or a street, we ask that you line it up with whatever's across, because that creates an intersection. Less confusion goes on when people are coming and going from the same spot. If it has to be offset, we require that it be offset far enough away from each other so that they don't interfere with each other. And usually that starts out about 150 feet and gets larger depending on the highway. On the Bristol Highway, the offset would have to probably be further than that. I say probably because I don't remember the number. That I'm used to enforcing the 150. That's usually what we're looking at. And what I'm talking about is a entrance on one side, whether it be a street or a new driveway, needs to line up with the driveway across or be offset from it. So as we review the preliminary plat, we'll be looking at that. We have to assure that this new location has good sight distance. You're looking in both directions to pull out. For sight distance on a highway like this, it's going to be much longer distance you have to be able to see than what you all have usually been faced with on smaller streets where we have subdivisions connecting to smaller volume streets. It's usually based on the speed of the traffic on the highway and how long it takes that car to reach the point from where you can first see it and when it arrives where it might crash into you at the new location. And that's usually 8 seconds. And you have to figure that out with math in terms of how fast they are on the highway, convert that to feet per second, multiply by 8, and that's what the distance will be that will be minimum for that highway. The developer will have to get a permit. He not only needs our approval for the new connection, but since it is controlled by the state will have to issue a permit. They will have to submit the same drawings they're submitting to us, to the state, to get a permit to make this new connection. Anybody that builds a driveway or a street connecting to the state highway has to do that. So the state traffic engineers will have the opportunity to review this also.
Thank you, Alan. That's fantastic. Evie?
Yeah, I want to talk. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate you answered a lot of the questions I was going to have also, but I just want to make sure we're not kicking the proverbial street can down the street, you know. Can we not take a look at what's happening in that whole collector street of Mountain View, which I'm assuming it is now? Is it a collector or arterial?
Mountain View would have to be a collector.
Okay. I mean, the question of the traffic light at Green Valley kind of rang my bell because that's the way I used to come into the Bristol Highway. Is this the best place to put another road, or would the same money invested in this road into a traffic light be a better, wiser use of funds? Is this the best location, or do we even think of another location to connect to Mountain View and the Bristol Highway? I'm not sure. This is an abandonment, I understand that, but I don't want to make a mistake abandoning something and not really solving the problem. And whether the problem is creating some turn lanes, that acceleration lanes, or whatever way we make that whole situation better coming off of Mountain View onto the Bristol Highway, wherever that happens, that we solve that once and for all. You may not solve it once and for all, but try to make a better attempt at it than just shifting a problem down the road. That's my concern.
I think what we've heard tonight, and for instance, the lady mentioned she had been in touch with the traffic office on a lot of occasions, but the information we've heard tonight may not have actually reached people that would make a decision that maybe an overall traffic study of the Bristol Highway is in order, regardless of this business tonight. That has been done in a small scale. They've mentioned the new light at Carroll Creek Road. Kind of a citywide study was done, and that was one of 6 lights that were put in roughly at the same time all across town, from the University Parkway to there. Again, lights are expensive, and so they are rarely put in because they can create other problems. But when the the traffic is large enough, it's easier to justify the installation of that light. A light at the current, Bill, I forgot the last name.
Ed Baxter.
Ed Baxter Lane doesn't go anywhere. It tees into Mountain View, and it tees into the highway. So it doesn't really set itself up to be an attractive place to get the best benefit from a traffic light. Moving it down and lining it up with another street makes that a little more attractive to have a light on the Bristol Highway to a street that has a more direct path somewhere. Now,
That's not to say that we would pick this new location for a traffic light. What I did say was maybe it's time that the city takes a look at the Bristol Highway in its entirety to see if there are places that would help the traffic get in and out of this neighborhood. Because they're right, there are only those limited locations where they can get out. That is why when they first proposed to us to abandon this road, we said there has to be a replacement. No one on staff is pushing for it to line up with Tucker Lane. There's been talk about that tonight because one of the citizens mentioned it, but that has never been a proposal that we have taken a look at. We have always insisted that it be lined up with another street. To try to line it up with Tucker Lane involves the power lines that were mentioned, plus the property line with what used to be Ride Revolution, which is now I think a church, is in the way. That would involve another party that would have to give up some land to make this road possible to line up with Tucker Lane. So it gets a little complicated to involve another property owner to make it line up with Tucker. It hadn't been that long ago, probably 15 to 20 years ago, it sounds long, that we did have to remove a hill in Mountain View so you could see better to come out of Tucker Lane. Sight distance at Tucker Lane was limited. And we went in and lowered the road a few feet to help you see further. So the current sight distance at Tucker Lane isn't, even though it's improved, isn't that great. So that's why that's not been a target.
Right. Most of the, let's say, coming out of this new road or Baxter Road, most of that traffic is going to probably head toward Johnson City, I would assume, rather than toward Bristol. So part of this design, it seems to me, ought to be an acceleration lane at the minimum out of this new road or whatever road we place. I think it needs a little bit more study in terms of satisfying the neighbors and their issues with traffic and getting in and out of that, whether it's Green Valley's always been a real pain. Wing Deer Park was a real bad situation until the traffic light got put in because there were accidents at the first entry to Wing Deer all the time. So I think we are not to defer the abandonment. I just soon see it abandoned, but not necessarily replace it with the same issue again. That's kind of my point.
A traffic study sounds like one of the places that we'd need to start here. Is that something that Public Works would initiate and do, or is it something that would require the developer?
I think, yes, Public Works can on its own, through the leadership of that department, decide to do a traffic study. We would hire an outside engineering firm that would come in and do traffic counts on all these connections. So that means there would have to be an appropriation or a budget that would fund the engineering aspect of that. We are limited, and we can do a certain study, but to do a broad area like that, we would tend to hire a consultant. So that would be something we need to be budgeted for. We've just finished a new budget, which doesn't include that.
The developer could do that on their own if they wanted to.
What does a traffic study customarily cost?
A traffic study of this nature could run as much as $25,000 minimum and could go up from there depending on what we ask them to do. Generally, you bring in people to do the turn movement counts. They're not done by a machine. And then you can do machine counts. But you need turning movement counts for traffic signal studies, and that's done by people. Quickly, to answer one thing that Uwe mentioned, we would require a decel lane for turning right in. The shoulder that's there now would have to be widened and developed into a decel lane. We rarely recommend acceleration lanes. The hospital, built back around 1980, has some acceleration lanes. They're very short on the state of Franklin in front of the hospital and a couple of their driveways. There's really no way that you can get enough length on an acceleration lane to get someone up to speed to merge. You kind of just get them out there and stop them, then they can't see very well to make the decision. So we have discouraged acceleration lanes, but we do want to get people that are turning right. If you've ever been behind someone turning right into a driveway, sometimes they practically stop even though it's a right-hand turn. And we want to get you off the highway to make your right-hand turn and not let you turn from the traffic lane. So there will be a requirement of a deceleration lane.
Mr. Chairman, I guess echoing some of the questions I've heard, and again, we're dealing with a right-of-way abandonment and a potential
Exactly.
stipulation that it be replaced. That's the question we're dealing with. But what I heard from a lot of the neighbors talking about traffic issues, it struck me that we may not want a third street with mediocre access to the Bristol Highway. In fact, we might want that one of 900 feet from Green Valley, we may want to pick the intersection we like best and push more traffic out a better route. Is there a way that we can address the request? Again, the Planning Commission doesn't get to answer the questions it wish it were asked. The Planning Commission gets to answer the questions we actually have been asked. And the question we've actually been asked is to abandon the right-of-way and replace that right-of-way with a seemingly comparable public right-of-way. Based on what you all have said about the problems out there and that I'm familiar with personally, I'm not sure, I don't think it makes your problem any worse. I think it probably keeps your problem sufficiently static. And so I guess I'm wondering, is there a way to act on their request while also preserving the right to say, maybe we don't want them to build another road. Maybe we want them to do what that would have entailed to help facilitate a better access point for the entire neighborhood back there.
I'll answer that this way. Staff has recommended the replacement. We feel like it needs to have the outlet, whether it be tough or not. They don't need to lose an outlet. So we are recommending that you have it. Now, of course, as a board and the city commission later can override staff, that's not a problem. We're okay with that. But our recommendation to you is that don't abandon a road and not replace it. That's why we are here with the new road before you tonight, because our preliminary meetings with the developer have made that clear. In terms of moving ahead, it's up to you. If you want to take the new road out of the picture now,
Oh, no, and I'm
that's
not,
okay.
and I'm not one to dismiss staff's recommendations, let me make that abundantly clear. But what I guess I'm asking is there a way, right now, the recommendation is approve the request contingent on the replacement street being accepted into the city, and I guess what I'm wondering is, can that motion be crafted in such a way that discretion remains for whether it needs to be a replacement road or it needs to be some other more effective remedy to help the traffic issues that the neighbors are talking about?
I think
So we choose where to put the road, is that
the
what you're saying?
opportunity for you to critique the road comes at preliminary plat approval. It has to come back to you for preliminary plat approval, whether it be a 2-lane road or a 3-lane road. It will also have been looked at by TDOT, but then we'll have had their input. That's where you either vote up or down the beginning of the design of this road. The preliminary plat approval doesn't require heavy design, but it requires enough design for us to get the basics of the road pinned down. That is so that if you don't approve it, they've not spent thousands of dollars on a full design. So if you do approve it, they go into the next step of completely designing it. But you set the standard for that road at preliminary plat approval, so that to give you some confidence you have a second chance to either say no to the road or approve the road. That would happen then.
And because the right-of-way abandonment is tied to the replacement road, we're making a decision about the right-of-way, but we can effectively unmake that at the next step in this process.
At the next step, you could say no to the way the road's designed or no to the road altogether. Whether the abandonment stands or not would depend on whether the city commission took it up before you got to the preliminary plat approval process. If it gets to the city commission, they'll be voting on first reading, second reading, and third reading. They may be interested enough to stop it on one of those readings until that preliminary plat approval process was passed, and then it could be stopped by them, whether or not they would take it to another reading.
A song may be able to address that, but I think the abandonment would be contingent on acceptance of the new road. So if we didn't approve the preliminary design of the new road, that would sort of
You'd never have accepted.
You'd never have something to accept.
So then you wouldn't abandon it, and the road would still remain in
I think we can have two conditions, if I can put it that way. The first being, and I think staff included that in the written recommendation that you have, which is before the city commission approves the ordinance, passes the ordinance on third reading to abandon this road, planning commission must have first approved the preliminary plat. So the designer, the engineer, they already worked on a preliminary plat, submitted to staff, we reviewed it, and we found a couple of problems with the plat, which we turned back to the engineer to the designer to revise. I think I didn't have enough time to work on all the revisions. A lot of the questions we're dealing with today are things that will actually be addressed in the preliminary plat.
Is there a public hearing for the preliminary plat?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a public hearing.
All right.
And
You get to come back.
we can,
But that really doesn't
because
solve
this
our
is,
issue.
because this is a
Issue we're
process.
talking about.
Because
It'll talk about buffers and noise and
Because
layout and entrances and exits. And those-
Well,
Because this is an application that involves, there are a lot of neighborhood concerns, we can go ahead and still send notices to the neighborhood on when we will have preliminary plat hearing, so that at that time, they can clearly see that these things have been addressed.
Right.
We can, if we have a situation where we don't need the new road, because that's a possibility from what Commissioner Joe was posing. If the commission, the planning commission says, we are approving this abandonment of the existing right-of-way contingent on two things. One, that before the city commission passes the ordinance abandoning this right-of-way, we, the planning commission, must have considered and approved the preliminary plat. What that does is they will have to have done all the study, determine precisely whether a new road will be needed or not, where it will be located, because what you have here is just a concept. It may not even end up being at that location. Side distances may end up not working. That would come back to the planning commission. Planning commission will examine it and say, okay, we need a new road. We approve a relocation. We want a relocation as shown on this plat. Then city commission can go ahead and pass the ordinance on third and final reading. Planning commission can say, from all the studies that have been done, everything that has been brought before us here in this preliminary plat, we don't think we need this road relocated. We rather think maybe the money that you would have spent in relocating the road should be used in putting a traffic light. Just an example. Maybe that may be an option. And really the neighborhood will have to, because our recommendation on relocating the road is really to continue providing cross-access to the neighborhood, to those residents in that area. If they say they don't want a road, it's really, I hate to use the word on them, but so the neighbors want a road, and that's why we think that a relocation is a better option. Okay. Having listened to the neighbors, having done the traffic count, we think that a relocation is a better option.
Because it doesn't make the problem worse.
It does, yes.
But it doesn't make the problem better either. And there may be an opportunity in the context of this to make it better.
To make it better.
There's a discussion amongst the feedback that the staff has gotten as well, that they want to make sure that there still is a road, as a matter of fact, for access. If they destroy one road, that you don't destroy it before you build the new road. And therefore, there was an advantage to having us accept a new road at final plat approval rather than preliminary plat approval, because at that point, we can actually put the road into service before you have a destruction of the old and abandonment of the old one.
Well, no, it's a bigger picture than that. A whole lot bigger picture than that. I know the neighborhoods believe, and if I was in your neighborhood, I'd probably feel the same way, that you need the road. But if we did a proper study, we may discover that, okay, maybe we need the road, but maybe it needs to be someplace else, half a mile up the road, or maybe, as Asan and Ubi has said, maybe we trade the cost of that road for a traffic light that controls the traffic better.
And I think my point,
and I see some heads shaking no, but
no, I think my point being that the plat approval process takes that into consideration. You can't accept the road until you've gone through all that.
Then the developers are 2 or 3 months more down the road.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. If the TDOT piece of this is contingent on us doing something.
Right.
And if we make us doing something contingent on us doing something before they can do the thing they're doing contingent on us doing the thing that we're making, I mean, at what point does everybody just throw up their hands and say, somebody needs to make a decision?
On what is going on. The thing is, some of those things can happen while others are going on. You know, we don't, one step does not have to finish before another starts. So Planning Commission makes a recommendation today. It goes straight to City Commission for first hearing. Why that is first hearing, second hearing, why that is going on, the designer can continue working on his preliminary.
And TDOT would accept that even if there were conditions placed on it?
The,
I mean, could the TDOT part of the abandonment proceed even though City Commission hasn't done its third reading on the abandonment?
No, TDOT would need to know that the city is accepted to go ahead and abandon this road. TDOT needs that certainty before they will make
progress.
Before they will make their
So
final.
slowly.
And the third, there's another important step in this, and I think that may be that has not been stressed. The construction plans. That's usually, it takes the longest time to get done. It may take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months to get the construction plans done. The process with TDOT to acquire that small piece that TDOT owns is not a 1 month process. They've been in touch, they've discussed with TDOT. It may take a 6 months process to get that done with TDOT. I think they have a commission that meets like twice a year or so that will look into it. So it's a long process out there. Once we look at the preliminary plat, even that preliminary plat can be approved subject to certain things being taken care of in the construction plans. The Planning Commission can make that decision. Planning Commission can say, although staff approves the construction plans, we want you to make sure that these things are taken care of and addressed before you approve that plan. If they're not taken care of, you can bring it to us. There is that appeal process to be brought back before the Planning Commission and the construction plans. So this is not a 2 months, 1 month thing we're looking at, no. We're really looking at about 7 months out. And I think the developers are aware of this.
Sum that up in 2 sentences in regards to doing it after accepting a road or doing it upon a preliminary plat approval.
And it can't be a run-on, it has to be
Like
2 sentences.
2 sentences. I'd like to hear that. I mean, is there a problem? I mean, you know, I'm still a little, I mean, I want to make sure that we still have access for people to still work on a road. And I would like to make sure that we do abandon it once we have the new road. And is there a benefit for doing it at preliminary versus at final acceptance, so.
So, staff will recommend that the Planning Commission recommends to the City Commission to abandon this road subject to 2 conditions. 1, that before the City Commission approves the ordinance abandoning this road on final reading, a preliminary plat would have been brought before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will have reviewed and approved it. That will solve all the design questions, most of the design questions we're looking at here. The second thing is, before the abandonment takes effect, because there's a difference between passing the ordinance and the ordinance taking effect. These are 2 separate things.
Right.
You can pass an ordinance and say this ordinance only takes effect 60 days after passage. You cannot enforce it within those 60 days. So the ordinance abandoning the road can specify very clearly that this abandonment, however, is going to take effect when the new road would have been constructed and accepted by the city. In that case, what the developer will be doing is basically a 2-phase process. I construct the new road, the neighborhood goes ahead, they start using the new road, and then they demolish the old road and build whatever they want to build there.
This is my point of confusion. There's 2 exceptions to it, right? One exception is a preliminary plat approval. The other exception is the new road actually being accepted and used. But the new road can't be used or accepted without the preliminary plat being done And even if you have the preliminary plat being done, you can't abandon it yet because you haven't accepted it yet. So it just seems more efficient just to simply say, when we accept the new road.
I think the element with the preliminary plat is just for us to make sure
We're gonna
whether
go
we're
through that
going to need,
process.
whether we're going to need a new road or not.
Right. And if we don't ever approve
We're
it,
not
they're
gonna have
never
any
going to
more
get to the next one.
information then. Without a traffic study or some other effort, we're not gonna have any more information then than we have today.
Let's
To
go-
make that
Kicking
decision.
the can down the road. If we
Let's-
don't address the problem of traffic on Mountain View at this point, where we have an
And Bristol.
opportunity to change the location of a road, we're ignoring a problem.
Let's stop this just for a moment and guide this into two different questions. We have a question, number one, of a right-of-way abandonment, and how do you decide when to abandon it? The second question is we have a whole new issue that was brought up today that wasn't what we were asked about traffic on Bristol and East Mountain View Road in this area. Now, we talked about how that can be done with traffic studies and how we decide to deal with it, but they're two different questions. And so I'm not sure that we want to hold hostage an abandonment discussion if it's one for the other, that's going to go through an appropriate process for a discussion on how do we answer all of Bristol Highway's traffic questions, which is a bigger question. And
It's a
Mr.
huge
Cantrell
question. It's a
wants to
huge-
talk to it, and I think it's a question worth answering. Please, Mr. Cantrell, tell us what you have to say.
A huge question, it's not on our agenda.
We do not, in every instance, initiate a traffic impact study. Some communities, that's one of the first things they're going to ask out of a new developer that's hooking up to a new highway. When the Food City came in on the state of Franklin, we had them do a traffic impact study. They hired a company, paid them what I told you we might have to, probably more. We can trigger a traffic impact study for a project of this size, especially with it involving a relocation of a street.
Okay.
But it would be focused on that area only, not the entire corridor.
Right.
I'm talking earlier about a corridor study.
Right.
But what we can do, it's in our standards. You can ask us to do it too. It gives us more support when we break the news, and they're hearing it now. We can order a traffic impact study similar to what we did when Food City came in. That study recommended changes to the traffic light, additional lanes at the traffic light at Sunset. It recommended the median that was put in, and it came down to a split of work. There was also a connector road built and right-of-way given on that project to connect to Skyline Drive, where we're now improving the traffic light at Skyline and State of Franklin. So it all kind of came together. The study supported the project at Skyline. It added the connector road across the Just Store property, and it created the median and the traffic signal changes, the double turn off of State of Franklin onto Sunset, for example. That type of thing can be studied and looked at here. Now, this is a little smaller road than Sunset Drive, so I wouldn't expect medians in the road to be recommended and things like that, but you never know. But this study would be on their dime and would be presented to us before we approve a preliminary plat, which means they would have to go get this started before they bring back anything on a preliminary plat. And they would have to present the study to us, see if we agreed at the staff level. We would ask questions, and it might go further. Then whatever that study comes up with, they would have to show it on their preliminary plat before we brought it to you. So there is an option we hadn't talked about tonight.
That would answer the questions concerned with this specific area.
Just
And
this
then if
area.
later we wanted to address the big concerns of an entire corridor and how that's laid out,
Well,
you can do
but I
that.
don't think it would, because I think what it would do, the problem isn't Ed Baxter Road.
Mhm. No.
Ed Baxter Road is one of 3 access points.
Right.
Closing and moving it creates some uncertainty about what the implications of it. The problem is Timberlake and Mountain View and Green Valley and the Bristol Highway and how all those things come together in a cluster. And so, you could make the developer do a traffic study, but it would be looking at the patient's toe when the knee is the problem.
What the study, from my point of view, what the study would help the staff do, you kind of see what's shown, it's a 2-lane street. It may end up saying, we need an extra turn lane for separating right and left turn at the highway. So if you're going to turn right, you can go ahead and do it, and left turn's got a place to store. The study might support having that added. They might add that voluntarily without a study. It would also identify whether or not a traffic signal is needed. Now, whether we agree to fund one or not, or have them pay for it, if we agree that's the right spot to be able to coordinate with the other lights, someone pretty sharp spoke with the platoon of cars coming down that the lights tend to group. We tend to try to put lights to where we can take advantage of that and keep them together. So it may not be that it's in the right spot for the system, but the study could start to point that out and maybe help us see things that staff's not seeing on its own. Staff still will be recommending that there be a replacement for the road, that it ought to line up with another street. We talked about alignment earlier. If it doesn't line up with another street, it needs to be offset a considerable distance where there's nothing going to be near the new T intersection, so that we separate the traffic turns from two different intersections. This one lines up as the reason we are okay with that location. Now, the study would say, make it bigger, or prepare it for something else. A broader study that we may ought to take a look at from not a developer's viewpoint, but as a city's viewpoint, is what needs to be done with the Bristol Highway to make it safer. Another connection into that area might be identified with that study. That would be nothing that the developer would build. That would be something the community would have to take on and acquire the right-of-way for, to build a better connection to that neighborhood at a better spot on the Bristol Highway that may give us more benefit. If we put a signal up, it may serve another city street across the way instead of being a T intersection. 'Cause I don't think there's a city street across. It's just driveways over there.
Correct. And if you think it's bad getting off Mountain View on that end, you should try to get on the Kingsport Highway. And I say that sort of to point out when the reconfiguration on the Kingsport Highway is finally implemented, do you have any idea how much that might impact the traffic? Because I would imagine if I were trying to do that every morning and every night, I would go to Timberlake, make a right-hand turn, hope for the best, and get up on the bypass, 381. I would never go out to the Kingsport Highway because you're coming up out of that hole, and if you're trying to do anything, you're taking your life. I mean, is there a sense that maybe that would pull some of that traffic towards 36?
Well, a traffic light is on the way to the Kingsport Highway. Right. First, a flashing beacon will be put up as an interim. And I mentioned a while ago, I'm going to answer your question. I haven't got lost. But I want to talk a little more about the Kingsport Highway light. The state is funding that light because it's a safety issue, a safety grant. And they identified that need on their own, and they have caused it to be the design. The safety money ran out for the previous budget. So they're delaying the bidding of that light until after the next budget. And they're looking at a December or early 2018 bidding date. The city in the interim is going to put up a flashing beacon until that light can be constructed. Now, yes, I think when a light goes up there, it'll make it easier to get out on that highway. And there will be a shift in traffic. Those people who want to have a light to help them turn left or go right or straight across will go to it. When Walmart was where a telecommunications center is now, no one used the driveway onto Roan Street. They went around behind the building, got on Springbrook, and went up to the light. We went out there and watched that happen. And when I shopped there in those days, I did it. So people will go to something they feel like is safer. So I do believe the neighborhood will utilize that. But if you live all the way down on this end, you may not see that as your best way out. So you may not shift all the way up there just to go in and out. But we don't really want to see the neighborhood lose another connection, even if it is somewhat limited in safety. We want it to be correctly built, though. But to take it out completely is not what we are recommending as a street network that we'd like to have.
Thank you. Question? You have a question?
I'd just like to make an observation, and I live off Carroll Creek, and we are constantly going over to the little ball facility behind Champion and coming down Timberlake. I will never let my kids or myself try to turn left off of Timberlake onto the Bristol Highway. So we always take it down to Baxter and then cut across. That's where you have the best sight distance going east and west.
You got a lot of hits.
So I'm part of that 63 people that go down. That's your best chance. That's your best place for survival, so I get it.
Chance and survival, those are words we like to hear.
Well, I mean, it's,
let's be clear, that's the road that's there.
I think those are things we should aspire to. We're the city where chance and survival.
So there, you know, as we sit here and we deliberate whether or not there's an issue, there is an issue. Whether or not we abandon the road, we should abandon the road, and there should be a road replaced. But the larger issue is how we move traffic east to west, and that's not for today.
Exactly. It's a good question.
All your points, I'm 100% on board. I thank you for your time today. But this is a process.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Ruddy.
I'd like to ask Jim Baxter to get his opinion. He grew up on that road and knows the neighborhood better than probably any of us because he dealt with it every day.
With all the citizens that spoke earlier, we need another traffic light. I didn't see any need in seconding that motion. My other reason for being here is obvious. It's named after my dad.
Right.
And I'm the reason it's named after him. And I'm curious when it is moved, if it is moved, will it still be at Baxter Road? That's one of the reasons I'm here, but it's a crapshoot every day, you know, and I guess in a way we're a part of that because the success of our business and the success of all those dealerships on the Bristol Highway has a great deal to do with the amount of traffic that's on the highway, but then there's just a lot of people that travel from Bristol to Johnson City. I've experienced that for 43 years in 2 different locations, and I'm sure most of the neighbors are really glad that we aren't where we used to be because it made it even worse for them when one of their 3 accesses was constantly busy with people pulling in and out of our business. So, but it's going, if you are, and obviously in my case I am, I'm going north on the Bristol Highway as we'll try to turn off at one of those 3 points if I choose not to use State of Franklin. It's a crapshoot to go north to Bristol. I mean, I don't care what time of day it is, but if it's early morning or late afternoon, you can sit there for 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe, before it's clear. And a lot of times and I'm sure they do the same thing, you go down to Wayfield Park, you turn around in Wayfield Park and you go back. It's the fence system. There's no other way to do it. So it's, there's bigger issues like you all have all said. I mean, but I did have some selfish reasons for being here tonight too. Because
I think that was a reasonable question, not the public input was closed, but I mean, as far as the naming, when we have a new subdivision or a new street that's accepted, that's the time that a new street is renamed. There's a question for the commission at that point in regards to that. I think that'd be the appropriate time to go over that. It'd be really super.
that's why I didn't get up and speak.
No, that's a reasonable
I thought it
thing.
was a selfish point.
No, and it's not, hey, that's.
No, it's your dad. It's not named
your
after
dad's-
you. It's not
yeah,
selfish.
It's a good deal. Do we have any further discussion or questions for staff? We are looking for considerations for motions at this point.
Motion itself, if you made it, is so complex, it's daunting, because you've got to remember everything that Asan told you. I'm willing to make a motion, or try.
I could propose one that I'm thinking of, but.
Well, go ahead then.
It seems to me that we have several issues that we're concerned about. That, number one, we have traffic concerns on Baxter, whether you're going to be coming out a new road that's a number of 100 feet down or not. We have traffic concerns, and that's a reasonable concern for the entire community. This does not happen to be the body tonight to actually answer that question. I want to be careful to make sure you all understand that. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, and we can ask Mr. Cantrell and his department to look at, hey, should we begin to initiate an entire corridor traffic count? I think it's reasonable to consider having, as we go through a process, if we were to, have a traffic count done for that specific road, so we can understand, does that initiate a process? Do we need 3 lanes there, a turn left, turn right lane? Those are great questions. But having that understood, our question today was, do we abandon this and do we follow staff's recommendation to replace the road with something that's comparable that's there today? And that we would think would be safe, that would meet all of the regulatory concerns and sight distance concerns and traffic concerns. And that's going to take it through this kind of convoluted process that we've tried to describe. So I would make the motion or ask someone to craft a motion that would say that we would accept the abandonment contingent upon acceptance of the new road, which is essentially what we're going to do when we accept the preliminary plat. The whole process could be killed at that moment if it's unacceptable to any one of us or y'all on public hearing. And that would
Well, it would need to be unacceptable
simplify
to the
it.
majority of us, not
Yes.
any one of us.
Well, yes,
Right.
Thank you.
So constructive.
So, accept.
That was very helpful.
Very nice.
We can't veto it. It's-
So let's accept the abandonment upon acceptance of the new road. And that ensures that we still have Baxter in place and working until that point. It ensures that we've gone through a good process for replacement and that it's safe. And that will initiate a concern for, in an investigation into whether or not we need a new traffic signal there. And I think clearly the discussion that we've gotten from you guys today is showing up and being a part of participation in government helps us understand that we need to consider, is this corridor working well? And then hopefully our staff can step back and look and say, okay, what's the best way to deal with all of the state of Bristol Highway? Because this may not be that we need the light here. Maybe it's someplace else. How do we do it? Do we need to look at a whole acquiring of land or doing that differently? But that's a different question. So again, to just restate what I would be looking for was, I think we should go ahead and accept abandonment contingent upon acceptance of a new road.
Let me understand the road and the preliminary plat, how those two things mesh, because there needs to be an opportunity before this is completely abandoned for these concerns to be heard in a public forum and for them to influence this body on those issues. So my
Right.
question is, should it be at the time of the new road, or should it be at the time of the approval of preliminary plat, or are those effectively the same thing?
They are two different things, and what's going to happen is the preliminary plat approval will occur first with public input and input from everyone who potentially is here now or more. So we have to approve the preliminary plat first. And Steve, even then, we won't abandon the
Okay, so
right-of-way.
and the next step is the
The next
actual-
step is actually approving the final plat and then accepting the road.
Now, that differs from Hassan's recommendation.
It does, but he had two different.
Right.
And I was saying that that's not
third
very
reading.
efficient, because really what happens is if you approve it contingent upon two things, acceptance of the road and acceptance of the preliminary plat approval, having it contingent upon accepting the road really sort of obviates the need for having it contingent upon the preliminary plat approval. That doesn't make any sense, because we don't need it contingent upon both. It's, if you do it upon acceptance of the road, the first one's going to have already happened.
I applaud your use of the word obviate. Thank you. That was very,
We apologize to the neighbors. This is the burden we bear.
yeah, I'm sorry.
We want to do it well. I mean, hopefully you see the deliberation is that we really carefully consider
The
what's going on.
problem I have is that we're not going to have any more information unless we have some way of encouraging a study or encouraging somebody to start. We're not going to have any more information to make a decision at that point than we do now.
What you can do is, what Alan said, is we can add to that the direction that we have traffic count as part of this plat approval.
Well, no, I think.
Do you want a whole corridor? Do you want the whole corridor fixed before they develop this one
Well,
thing?
no, I don't think
Well-
that, I don't think that's exactly what he's saying. I think, if I may, I think I hear you making a point that if we do this, in 6 months, we're going to be back looking at a preliminary plat approval, and we'll be asking ourselves the same question about whether a traffic light might have helped. And maybe they'll have made the developer do a traffic study, and they'll have said, do a decel lane off of Mountain View. And they'll have agreed to do a decel lane off of Mountain View, and we'll all be sitting here contemplating the same questions we're contemplating right now about, is a third road accessing the Bristol Highway what we need, or do we need to re-envision how all of that traffic moves to the Bristol Highway? And so if we don't, and you're correct, what will if it doesn't kind of go to the city commission as a question of a broader nature, this will go, we'll have first reading on the abandonment tied to the acceptance of the road, and at some point you'll have a preliminary plat approval, and we will know no more then than we know today.
Except for the road that we'll be putting in place will be a replacement for the one that's there.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't think it's going to make it any worse. We're not going to make it any worse, we're going to respect private property.
Yeah, no, well, right. So it's not going to, I think that would be staff's take, is it's not going to make it any worse. But it may miss an opportunity to make it better. And frankly, if I'm the developer of the dealership, there's several scenarios where this could play out and be better for them. As far as potential, again, I have no idea what a traffic study would reveal, but it could make their parcel a more highly traveled intersection, conceivably.
How would you recommend going about fixing it differently?
I don't know that we want to do that.
I don't have solutions. Aeson's got, I think he thinks he can help us.
There's a motion and a second. There's
No,
a
there's not a second.
motion and no second.
We're not following Robert's here.
There's actually not a motion on the floor yet.
I think we need to I call for a question, make a motion, and let's kick that motion around. And move
Well, we don't
forward.
have a motion yet.
Well, making one.
No, I was discussing what I would like to see happen. We're having discussion.
Well, I'll make the motion based on what I heard from Hassan. And I'm making a motion that we approve the abandonment based on two conditions. Condition number one is the planning commission must approve a preliminary plat before the second condition of the third reading of the abandonment on the city commission. Is that right?
Well, you need to have the acceptance of the road, too.
Well, the acceptance of the road comes from the plat.
Well, but you could have a preliminary plat approval and not have a road you can drive
And then
on.
they can destroy the road, and that's why.
I think, if I can have the city, the planning commission.
Can you fire smoke, doesn't it?
The planning commission on this. The reason I had those two conditions, the first being the planning commission approving the preliminary plat before the city commission passes the ordinance on third reading, is to take care of whether we need a road there or we don't. Once we approve the preliminary plat, vested rights are accrued on that project from that moment. Vested rights.
Right.
The developer begins to accrue vested rights on the project the moment we approve the preliminary plat. This is a subdivision. And in every subdivision process, the planning commission can make whatever requirements it wants to make to ensure public safety. Some of those conditions can be put in place before the acceptance of the preliminary plat. In other words, the planning commission can say, before we approve this preliminary plat brought before us, we want to make sure that this traffic study that Alan talked about at that particular property area has been done and brought before us. We want to make sure that everything is okay before we approve your preliminary plat.
I
Planning
stand
commission
corrected.
can-
I understand what you're saying now. Don't make it an ordinance until you actually have the preliminary plat.
in front of you, and you notice that everything on this plat works.
But that could play out. Third reading could be before Labor Day. And the likelihood of getting a traffic study of the scale that some are contemplating by Labor Day, probably not possible.
Well, then you have to put it in budget if you're going to study the entire
Well, a
corridor.
$25,000 study does not have to be in budget.
Okay, the
I mean,
small one is the one I was talking about that I thought
It would
people were
have to be,
against.
it would
Yeah.
have to be approved, but, I mean, in the city's budget, we don't have to wait till next May to deal with a $20,000 traffic study. If
They may
in
have
fact
the
that
dev-
becomes a
And they may
priority.
actually have that on the developer for that part. That was what.
Well,
they
I
were
don't
saying.
think, you're not gonna expect a developer to fund a traffic study on the scale that I think people are contemplating here. I mean, the developer's interest is this Ed Baxter, that, you're not gonna be able to have them talk about Green Valley and, the bigger area.
Did I hear that wrong? I heard Alan Cantrell say that looking at just Ed Baxter in that area would be about $25,000. Looking at a larger area is a budgetary process.
Alan may want to come clarify. I thought the 25 number was something a little more comprehensive.
No, it was just for the,
I did give you 25,000 for a comprehensive study, and I said it would go up from there depending on what we asked them to do. And I'm going to reveal something for the
Comprehensive
public. When I gave you that number, a good sound number would be closer to 100,000. But I'm going to tell you that if I had stood here a while ago and said 100,000, they would think that I'm trying to highball it to say to put an obstacle in doing anything. So I didn't want to give a number that sounded like we were trying to run it up there so that we would say, oh, that's too much to do a study. So I say 25,000 and up, depending on what we ask them to do. And if we ask them to do a very comprehensive study, it can go even higher than 100,000. So since you got that deep into it, I need to reveal my thought process, and I didn't want to throw a big number out there that made them think I was trying to stop it right there with a big number.
In staff's opinion, is it time, not talking about the subject we're dealing with here, is it time for the city to do a comprehensive study of that corridor?
I think most of us staffing here, and you guys have heard enough tonight, but there are some key people who are not here that will have to understand what we've heard to make it completely happen. In other words, I'm not in charge of the department and so forth.
Asking staff's opinion.
Staff's opinion, I think we've heard enough tonight to say that highway needs to have a study done. It's not been that long ago we did a study of West Market Street. Back when they did the Millennium Center, issues were up. Millennium Center is going to overload State of Franklin right there at the university and kill State of Franklin if we let all that be built in there. So we did a corridor study of State of Franklin beginning at what is now University Parkway all the way up past the hospital. And I guess that's around the year 2000. The city did that corridor study. So we've done them in the past because of a development coming up that raises the questions. I don't know why we can't repeat that process again. Then secondary to that, before we were happy with the Food City driveways and what Food City needed to do, we triggered the impact study on that general area. That's on their dollar. So that smaller study tells us more what to do about the immediate area and how safe to make the in and out of that property be, including the new road. The bigger study that the city probably should take on needs to identify a larger area and what can be done to empty that neighborhood out at a good and safe location that a traffic signal can be put out. That's what that study's purpose would be. Now, we've got a city commissioner on the board, but we would have to have, even if it somehow was appropriate out of this budget, we need higher management to be on board with this. So I can't tell you 100% yes, a study will be done.
No,
but I think we can
question.
recommend it, and I'm standing here saying, I feel like it should be done now after I've heard it.
How long did that take? How long would that study take?
Well, generally, we can't call up an engineer and say, come work for us. We have to put out a request for proposal. It's kind of like bidding, but it's not bidding. Have several companies send their credentials to us, pick one, get the board to approve a contract with them, and turn them loose. The actual work may take 3 months. They've got to come in to identify where we're going to count traffic. They put people at those intersections, and they actually count the traffic.
For the whole process, Alan, from
About
today?
90 days
90 days.
once you've hired an engineer.
No.
Just to even go out and find.
Well, it would
and
take
everything.
us 60 days to hire an engineer.
And
And then 90 days, once they're cut loose, to do the project.
a year.
Well, no, 150 days. Okay.
Alan, will this, in your opinion, would the smaller study adversely affect the overall comprehensive study, or
No.
will it? Okay.
No, a comprehensive study would take into account what has been done already. The developer of the Walgreens on University Parkway at South Run Street did an impact study. The medians, all those restricted turns came out of that. The most recent one I mentioned, Food City. There are others in the past that we could go down the list, but like I said, it's not every project. It's those that raise big concern about what that project may do to the highway. Even though it's just a little smaller center at South Rome, it was a lot of input from the public on that one, so we did the impact study. And it led to a good solution. I don't think it's been a disaster. I think Food City has been okay. The neighborhood, if you remember, behind Food City didn't want any of that to happen. We haven't opened up the side road fully. I think Skyline got opened this week, but the new work at the new traffic light's not fully, so it's not really found its final potential for controlling traffic at Food City, but I can say I believe that it's operating safely.
So we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel to look at doing the smaller study?
No.
It would maybe augment the...
The smaller study would help us approve a new road under the safest conditions we could come up with. Not just relying on staff's input, but we'd get some expert input on it. So you're adding a little bit extra to making sure you have a good new connection there in that one area. The overall study would take a look at all these other issues, these other streets. Where should a light go, here, there, or another location, or a brand-new location somewhere else?
Well, I don't think any of us would want to support the smaller study only to find out we put a road somewhere that shouldn't have been when we looked at the...
Now, the smaller study would not take a look at another location. It would just look at this site. Now, it might move it around like a song said earlier. It might move it a little bit to get it at a more prime location along that frontage. But we'll keep the other end lined up with going back into the neighborhood because we don't want to get it out of alignment.
It likes to be better than how Baxter tees right now.
Right. So the idea is that the concept you have gives the general location. By the time we get to that preliminary plat, the precise location is starting to be pinned down. And I think the traffic impact study for this site should be done in order to have the results of that study implemented in that preliminary plat.
And that's usually done by the developer, correct?
That's done by the developer.
Yes, sir.
And there may be an analogy here. Several years ago, there was a rezoning request that came before an earlier planning commission related to the General Mill property. And the neighbors around that property were understandably very concerned about what the petitioner was talking about doing. And again, that was one of those instances where the planning commission got to answer the question we were asked, not the question we wished we had been asked. And I guess my only concern is in this instance, there are much bigger issues at play with the three roads and traffic and safety and moving people in and out of that area that I'm very familiar with that really aren't a Ford dealer's problem to fix. And so what we probably need to keep in light is that the dealership is the property owner and they're making a specific request in the view of staff and potentially a more isolated traffic study tries to at least keep things at an even or slightly improved. I mean, even if they make a significant improvement in that one little area, it's not going to overcome the broader systemic issues that exist across all three streets and the way it hits 381. So I'm not sure. So using the General Mill property as an example, that gave rise to the creation of a separate, distinct task force relative to the West Walnut Street district that got to answer the questions that we hadn't been asked. And there may be some model there that applies here. I don't want to see us lose sight of the specific petition before us because there are bigger challenges to be overcome.
This body, Alan, could go ahead and just vote tonight to request staff to consider moving forward with a corridor, a larger traffic study on Bristol Highway. Is that correct?
Yes, the staff can actually ask for that, but we can do it at a stronger stance if you are recommending this traffic impact study. It's in our standards, and there are triggers, but like I say, it's usually not triggered unless there's something like this, when we have a lot of public input that brings up questions about whether we're being wise about what we're about to allow to happen. The study helps us make wiser decisions, and if you can support that, it makes our life easier when we're talking to the developer about it later.
As a part of a single motion, or just as a general spirit of the, I mean, do you need us to take formal action?
I don't think you have to vote on it, but I think if I hear enough voices here tonight say that we should not bring a preliminary plat back here without that study being a part of it, that would be helpful. If I hear enough
think
people say that.
Raise your hand.
I don't think you have to vote on it, but it's something staff can trigger on its own, but I appreciate your backing on it.
I think that what I'm hearing is most people here would like to see a formal corridor study done so we can understand what we're dealing with there at some point. But that's not what you're talking about. But in the motion that we're going to make regarding the issue at hand tonight, we should have attached to that a traffic count study as part of the preliminary plat approval process.
Yes, it's not just traffic counting, but yes, traffic impact.
Traffic impact. That's what I meant to say.
But did you say you just wanted to see us support that, or should it be part of the motion?
If you feel like it's you'd like to make it strong and make it part of your motion, go ahead. All I'm saying is, if I hear enough from you tonight that we should have a traffic impact study, we'll make it happen.
I think.
And I would appreciate your support.
I would want to see that as part of our motion for a traffic impact study for this specific small area. I think when we're done with this, if we all want to discuss whether or not we want to look at the entire corridor and initiate that process with staff, that's something we can consider. That's a different issue.
Two motions or just?
I think that would be
all
two different
encompass?
motions, and that's something that we can come up with.
I think the more complex a single motion can be, the better. Then nobody knows what we're voting.
Jim? Go ahead. You go ahead and make a motion. You're the most
Well, do we
most
do?
person on-
Yes, it's on.
For the sake of the developer, for clarity, is it the position of the planning commission that the bigger study, that is the entire corridor, be done before the preliminary plat, or just the smaller study?
Smaller study.
Smaller.
Yeah, smaller study.
We want to make
We
sure.
haven't made a motion yet.
Okay.
Although it appears we have not made a motion.
We've just got a lot of talk.
The key is not
I think
to hold up this development. These people are spending
That's
money.
right.
The key is that we don't just kick the can down the road, that we have a problem, we need to get either staff or a developer to help alleviate the problem there as much as we can. We may not be able to totally say, you gotta have a traffic light there or something, but it's just, I don't think it's been carried far enough with a sketch that we have right now, that, to approve a second replacement road. There may need to obviously be a replacement road, but I don't think that the sketch gives it justice. So it's either got to be staff or developers got to do it before we look at a preliminary plat.
I think the concern about looking at the preliminary plat, if I understand correctly, is that if you guys don't know that there's a willingness amongst this commission to abandon this right-of-way under some sort of contingencies, then there's no real point in moving forward, and you're spending a lot of money. So we are talking tonight about abandoning this contingent upon some things being fulfilled. But that gives you the understanding that we're on board with moving forward with the process. It's a bit odd, but it's because it's what you need to be able to move forward. And I think that that's the reason we're looking at it in this sort of an odd way, because normally we would be looking at this from a standpoint of, we're looking at a preliminary plat and understanding if we like this, and we're looking at traffic impact studies and curb cuts, and we're really trying to understand it at that point. I think putting the contingency upon there says we're willing to abandon it, but if these things are met, it doesn't mean they are met. Am I getting that correct?
And the things we're talking about are planning commission approval of the preliminary plat before city commission's third reading.
Right.
And the right-of-way effectively is abandoned when the new road is accepted.
Right. So there's two things that have to happen.
And we're
Some more information
Yeah.
to the study come to us prior to that
Well, and
preliminary
the-
plat, or
and
at
the-
least a part
and the
of it.
petitioners are in the room and recognize that the preliminary plat approval is part of this exercise. And so I don't think we need to formalize that we need that study if they know that in.
We're just offering support
Yeah,
to Alan.
right. Well, no, I don't want to say, I'm just trying to make the motion simpler.
Right.
You know, I think the study, I think,
I don't know if we can make it simple.
Have you made a motion?
No,
Are you
not
making-
yet.
Are you making a motion?
well, I thought Jamie made it.
He was starting one.
No,
I stopped
Jamie
it.
started one. For the purposes of moving this along,
Please.
I would make a motion that we would approve the abandonment, subject to the city commission not taking it up on third reading until preliminary plat approval has been given by the planning commission. And secondarily, that the abandonment not take effect until a new road is accepted by the city.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
Are you going to further recommend that an impact study?
Well, we're going, the staff's going to get that.
Yeah, and what we could-
They'll get that
They're going to be
passed.
instructed to
Needs
do
to be
that.
two different.
I think we can make that as so let's make that as a separate motion. Now, are you talking about the broader impact
No.
study or the
Minimum.
specific?
Well, here's the long story
Because-
short, is we don't have to approve that preliminary study without a traffic impact study.
Well,
for the
that's what he
preliminary
needs
plat.
to say.
And we can go ahead and put that in there, or they have heard us say that several times.
Go
That's the
ahead
expectation.
and vote on this without talking about that traffic impact study, because it's associated with the preliminary plat, not the abandonment. So I think you got a good motion for what this is.
Okay, let's vote.
Then, before you adjourn,
Make another motion.
Thank you for
Okay.
the recommendation, Mr. Cantrell.
Call the question.
Any further questions?
No, there's not.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh, for the love of Pete.
Did you get it?
I think so.
Do you want
Oh,
to
I
read it
hope
back?
so.
Yes, may I?
You please.
Okay, approve abandonment subject to the city commission not taking it up on third reading prior to the planning commission approval
Of a
preliminary
preliminary
of
plat.
a preliminary plat, and abandonment not take effect before the new road is approved and built.
Is accepted is actually
Accepted,
the, yeah.
okay. Thank you.
That is excellent.
Okay.
Okay, with that motion having been out there, please call roll.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Commissioner Sandos?
Yes.
And Chairman Zions?
Yes.
Okay, quick.
Okay, now,
Now,
can we make
let
a?
me go ahead and open up the floor for another motion
Okay, that's what I
to, to have, and does anybody want to make any motions for a traffic impact study?
I would make the motion that we ask that a traffic impact study be part of the preliminary plat petition to come.
I'll second that.
We got a motion and a second, please call the roll.
Commissioner
Oh,
Lowe?
wait, we have discussion.
I
We
just
got
have one
discussion.
question on
Oh,
this.
sorry.
Apologize, Jamie got out there quick.
So whether if we abandon the road, we're just talking about whether they put it somewhere on that piece of property?
Yep. Slide it 400 or
And we need a
500.
study for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the reason for the study is to find out, should it be a two-lane road, or should it have a turn lane left and right, and what does it look like for a decel lane or something like that?
And
And
you
the
were
proper
talking about-
location on the plat.
And
We've done
Alan
that
was
with
talking about
CDS and some other
shifting it.
places.
Okay. Just checking.
I mean,
Because
get
you
that
may
right,
not
Alan?
fix all the
Yes.
problems, but you could certainly make many of the problems better
It's
doing this
refinement.
road better.
It's a refinement, yeah.
Yes,
And it
You
won't
make a good point. I mean,
adversely
keep the staff
impact the larger
I-
study.
versus.
that's correct.
I don't know why staff couldn't do this on their own, honestly.
Do what?
We didn't,
Figure out that we need a
we
right
didn't say
turnover.
they had to do it.
I mean,
We
I
just said it
think
needs to
they're
be done.
qualified. I think they've done enough road projects that they have the knowledge.
Well, no, we're not speaking to that. We're not speaking to how they accomplish it,
Right,
are we?
Well, you
Well,
said.
you
we're
said
required to
commission a study.
yeah.
That needs an
I didn't-
outside vendor.
My motion wasn't require, I actually, in my mind, used the word ask for.
Yes,
Okay.
we
to
were
be
going to ask
included.
staff to consider the track.
Okay.
That's nebulous enough.
That's how I like it.
But let them know that we actually care about this issue, and we would like to make sure the road
Well,
is
I think there's
appropriate.
enough concern from the neighborhood that we want to be able to confidently say, we've at the worst kept it the same and potentially refined it such that it is better.
It's gotta be
And as
better
a separate and larger question is all of this other stuff that has nothing to do with a Ford dealership on the Bristol Highway.
Right.
And that's what we're doing.
It's
our
a
homework.
first step toward looking at that whole
Right.
picture. That's the key. But I don't want the can kicked down the road. I mean, really, we need to start addressing these issues along the Bristol Highway, whether it's traffic lights or whether it's intersection design. The simple design that's on the plat that we have right now, it just doesn't do anything for me. I think it needs to be developed more. That's really the gist. So you made a motion?
Yes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's restate the motion, make sure we have it clear, and that is that we were going to request staff to consider a traffic count in regards to the preliminary plan. Impact study, yes, sorry. That's what I mean.
Yes, correct.
Got it, thank you, apologize.
Okay.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Yes.
Commissioner Cooper?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Benedict?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Commissioner Sandus?
Yes.
And Chairman Zines?
Yes, thank you. Having said that, we have no further informational items. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Yes. And we need to thank y'all very much.
And I wanna-
You've helped us.
One moment
job better.
for the thank you, Mr. Cooper, but I wanted to, before y'all got up, to let you know, there was questions about buffers and sound and all those types of things. Those are reasonable questions. They're just not regards to road abandonments. Those are things that be discussed at a preliminary plat approval. And that's
And
where
staff.
and with staff, and hopefully they discuss things with the neighborhood and all kind of work together. But it's not uncommon for them to have neighborhood meetings, those types of things, and that's where that gets worked out.
I was fewest agenda item and the longest meeting.
Are we adjourned?
Yes. Adjourned.